Hello and welcome to the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Powell. For this episode, we'll be listening to the 1973 release on Musical Heritage Society label called Elizabethan Guitar Music. The guitarist is Betho Davzak. This is going to be an interesting record because although you may be aware of some of the composers on the pieces, these are pieces that largely I was not familiar with. There are about 3 on the entire record that I knew coming into it. So some great listening for you. Sit back and enjoy. We'll be right back. And we're back on the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. I really enjoy this recording, and I'm glad that I decided to share it with you all on this episode. One of the interesting things that draws me into looking at a record jacket is sometimes what's there and what's not there, of course. With this, you'll take a look on the cover art that I post on each and every episode. You'll see the record jacket in its entirety, and you see a very curious sort of lithograph or etching. As you look a little bit further, it shows a number and some Italian writing, Cittarino Duerfo. And anyway, it made me sort of hearken back to one of the books that I was studying on when I was a student, and it was an old book called Classical Guitar Duets, and interspersed, about every 7 or 8 pages, or 7 or 8 pieces, I suppose, there were these little engravings on here, and I always was fascinated with it, and I thought, well, that's just really cool to look at. That's what sort of jogged my memory, and I thought, hey, I've seen these before, and so just started to do a little bit of looking along with some of the typical research I do for these episodes, and it's by a Flemish Baroque artist by the name of Arnold van Westerhout, and these were a series of engravings that he did in 1723, and they're just fascinating. So if you like looking at sort of Baroque art or art that involves guitar and fretted instruments of the like, because certainly these are not instruments that we play today, all of them. And so anyway, but they're very curious and they're very cool. Just a slight aside I thought I might share with the audience on this. The other thing that's sort of not there with this record jacket is the fact that it's one of these black and white Musical Heritage Society record label things. And I've done a couple other these where I've seen them. One I've got, and there's one of a bunch of Villalobos etudes that's almost unlistenable. So as I get better and better with the cleaning of these, the sort of the surgical cleaning of these records, maybe someday I'll be able to get that playable and listenable. But in any case, we'll sort of have to wait. It has sort of fascinated me. What is the Musical Heritage Society? And so, hey, I went and looked that up as well. So the Musical Heritage Society, as I could figure out from just a couple of quick internet search things here, was a record label formed in 1962 in New York. And basically what I could sort of equate this to is in my day, there was such a thing as a CD or a cassette club that you would belong to. And this was sort of the same idea, although the description that I found in the reading was that it was like a book club. And so what one would do is you would subscribe to the club, and then they would send you a catalog of other titles that they had in their catalog, and then you could order different titles on that. And from what I gather, that's what the Musical Heritage Society was, and then it took a couple of changes and has sort of morphed into, and they are the original group is still sort of together. It's under a different name now, and they have evolved into digital music listening. So just sort of fascinating. But in any case, one of the neat things with the medium of the LP is that there is this massive area for art and record art and that sort of thing, and the cover, it's sort of a lot to do with it. Now, on the classical side, it's usually pretty. It's usually a picture of the artist or fine art or something like that. And in this case, we do have some fine art, but it's black and white. It looks like sort of a generic food label, something that would just say saltines on it or something like that. But inside, we've got a really, really, I think, a wonderful recording by a guitarist that I had not heard of before doing this episode, before listening to this record several times. So Betho Davzak. And so Betho Davzak was somebody who, I'm just reading right off the back of the record jacket here. He was born in Uruguay in 1938. He studied the guitar with his father and harmony and counterpoint with Guido Santorsolo. and later joined the master classes given by Andres Segovia in Santiago de Compostela, Spain, and Alrio Diaz in Alessandria, Italy. And so in any case, he's got quite a pedigree, was noticed by two, giants, of course, Diaz not being quite well as known as the Andres Segovia, but if you've played guitar for any amount of time, certainly you've come across the name of Alrio Diaz. He was certainly a guitar player in the Segovia camp and that sort of thing. So in any case, let's get away to side one here. We have an entire side devoted to the music of John Dowland, and so I'll just read you the titles that you're going to hear. John Dowland, of course, lived from 1563 to 1626, and so we have this sort of Renaissance gold here, played on the guitar. This music certainly would not have been played on a guitar. It would have been played on a lute, but these are transcriptions, of course, and so here are the pieces in the order that we hear them. Tarleton's Resurrection, Earl of Essex Galliard, Mrs. Vaux's Gigue, Melancholy Galliard, Sir John Smith's Almain, Farewell Fancy, Queen Elizabeth's Galliard, Earl of Derby's Galliard, and we close with the Fantasy. As I mentioned, I know about three of these from my studies. These are certainly not the most well-known of the Dowland works, but in any case, there's a couple treasures in there. I think that the guitarist's tone on this is really nice. He's got a great feel and a great sound, and so I invite you to enjoy side one of Elizabethan guitar music, released in 1973 on the Musical Heritage Society label. Enjoy. And we're back on the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. I hope you enjoyed that first side of John Dowland music. A lot of those pieces maybe are the first time that you've heard them. I know I've read about some of these titles, but to actually listen to these transcriptions is pretty much the first time for about half of the repertoire on the first side. So I hope you enjoyed that, those selections. As we continue with side 2, we've got music of Francis Cutting. We have an Almain and a Walsingham. Then we have a composer I've never heard of before. His name is Barrick Bullman, and that's a Pavane. So, lovely little piece. Then we have Robert Johnson, not to be confused with the person who went down to the crossroads, of course, but this is the Robert Johnson, the lutenist from 1583 to 1633. There are 3 little pieces here, Carmen's Whistle and then 2 Almains. Almain is a dance. Then we have Thomas Morley, 1557 to 1603, a Pavane by Thomas Morley. And we close out this album with another composer that I've not heard of before today, named Daniel Batchelor, and this is Monsieur's Almain. So my sort of read on this whole record is there's probably a reason as to why these pieces are not, as well known as some other of the treasures of the Renaissance that we're used to hearing. And, are they as good? No, but they are. It is good music, and it's enjoyable to hear the counterpoint and the interplay between this style. And I think the performance is done very, very well by Beth O'Dave-Zach, and I'm looking forward to finding perhaps more recordings of this guitarist. As I looked online, I only found about 3 albums that he ever recorded, so I may not have very good luck with that. But in any case, I think this is a good record. It's fun. I really have always enjoyed music of this era quite a bit ever since I was exposed to it. And I was exposed to it pretty early from my first guitar instructor, where we did quite a bit of Renaissance and early music transcriptions for lute on guitar. So in any case, this is it. This is side 2 of Elizabethan guitar music, MHS 1950 from 1973. Enjoy. Thanks for listening. Make sure to reach out to us on the socials if you're liking what you're hearing. You can always reach out at anchor.fm/PowellGuitar. My Instagram account is instagram.com/PowellGuitar. You can also reach me at Facebook or at my absolute website, which is PowellGuitar.com. So happy listening, enjoy, and we'll see you for the next episode.
you.